Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Batman Dark Victory. Now, Dark Victory is a graphic novel written by Jeph Loeb and illustrated by Tim Sale, and of course published by DC Comics, and this features the character of Batman originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Now, this was first published as a 14-issue comic book series between the years 1999 and 2000, and then later on all 14 issues were collected as one graphic novel or trade paperback. This is also a sequel to Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale's Batman comic, The Long Halloween, which is considered by many to be one of the quintessential Batman stories. Like, it's one of those comics that if you consider yourself a fan of this character, you kinda have to read. Now, I already reviewed The Long Halloween back in 2022, because these Batman reviews are something I do every year, and I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can check out that review. Now, the plot of The Long Halloween is it was set early in Bruce Wayne's career as Batman, and it was about Batman, Jim Gordon, and then District Attorney Harvey Dent trying to take out the mob in Gotham City, specifically a vicious crime lord named Carmine Falcone. But in that story, Batman was also trying to figure out the identity of a serial killer nicknamed Holiday, who was killing different people associated with the Falcone crime family on holidays throughout the year. So, massive spoilers if you haven't read The Long Halloween, but the story culminated in Harvey Dent getting acid splashed on his face in court, which that coupled with his already pre-existing psychological issues and the stress of dealing with the mob and issues going on with his marriage basically drove him completely insane, and he became the criminal known as Two-Face and essentially became the leader of his own gang, a gang of gimmicky costumed freaks. And by the end of the comic, Harvey Dent killed Carmine Falcone, and Falcone's son, Alberto, was revealed to be the Holiday Killer, or at least Alberto took the fall for all the Holiday killings, because in that book, it's heavily implied that there might have been another Holiday Killer as well. So, Dark Victory ostensibly deals with the aftermath of Long Halloween, but the book also serves as a retelling of Robin's origin. So, the plot of Dark Victory is it begins a few months after the events of Long Halloween. Carmine Falcone's daughter, Sophia, is now the head of the Falcone crime family, and Harvey Dent and Alberto Falcone are locked away at Arkham Asylum. And in the beginning of the story, there's a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, and Harvey Dent, along with several other inmates, escape. Alberto doesn't escape, but he does later get released to the custody of his brother. And after this breakout, a cop is murdered. Specifically, he's hung, and this triggers a series of murders, all involving police officers. So, now it appears Gotham City is once again being terrorized by a serial killer, this time called the Hangman Killer, and Harvey Dent, or Two-Face, is the primary suspect because all of the Hangman's victims had these cryptic messages pinned to their bodies, but the messages were written on documents that belonged to Harvey Dent. So, throughout the comic, Batman is trying to solve this mystery, but he's also distancing himself from Jim Gordon and Selina Kyle, and he's dealing with the fact that he lost one of his closest allies, that one of his closest friends and allies, Harvey Dent, has become this criminal and may very well be this serial killer. And eventually in the comic, we meet a family of trapeze artists called the Flying Graysons, and somebody sabotages their ropes, and during a performance, the ropes break, and we see Mr. and Mrs. Grayson fall to their death, leaving young Dick Grayson orphaned. So, Bruce Wayne, who witnessed the murder of his parents when he was a child, takes this kid in, and eventually we see Dick Grayson become Robin. Now, I actually think Dark Victory is a worthy follow-up to Long Halloween, even though it is, in essence, the same plot as Long Halloween. Both stories deal with serial killers killing people on holidays. Obviously, the methods and victimology is different, but essentially both books have the same murder mystery plot. And I will say Dick Grayson almost feels like an afterthought in the story, only because he shows up in the comic so late. That being said, I do think the comic handled Dick Grayson / Robin very well. In the story, you see Bruce Wayne trying to connect with this kid, but it not really working because he's Batman. He doesn't have time to be this adopted father figure to Dick Grayson, and it's not until Bruce Wayne reveals that he's Batman to him that they actually start to develop this relationship. There's also a particularly move-in moment in the story where we see Dick Grayson wander into Bruce's parents' room, and then we see Alfred confront him, and this is juxtaposed with a flashback of a young Bruce Wayne who recently lost his parents going into his parents' room, and we see how the two scenes kind of mirror each other. And we find out in the flashback that Bruce Wayne said to Alfred, "I'm all alone now," and Alfred made the mistake of not saying anything, and then we see in present day when Dick Grayson essentially says the same thing, Alfred says, "You are not alone," because he's trying to prevent Dick from becoming another Bruce. And in some ways you could read the comic as sort of an exploration of trauma. But while Batman might have lost an ally in Harvey Dent, he also gained an ally. Not just an ally, but a son in Robin. And we see how much Batman needed Robin. Without Robin, who knows what would have become of Batman? Maybe he would have gone down the same dark path as Harvey Dent. And speaking of Harvey Dent, this is also a great Two-Face story. Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain, and here you get a lot more of Harvey Dent as Two-Face, which is never a bad thing in my opinion. And here we see just how far gone he is now, and that the good man he once was is basically dead. And this, much like Long Halloween, is basically a story about the end of the mob in Gotham City. How Gotham goes from a city run by the mob to a city run by a bunch of gimmicky costumed freaks, like the Joker, Penguin, Scarecrow, or Mr. Freeze. So yeah, I recommend Dark Victory. It's not as good as Long Halloween, but in my opinion, it is a worthy follow-up. And both this and Long Halloween, aside from being great Batman comics, they're also great love letters to classic noir detective stories, as well as love letters to gangster films like The Godfather and Goodfellas, as well as psychological thrillers like Manhunter and The Silence of the Lambs. Now, Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale would follow this up a few years later with sort of a spin-off series called Catwoman When in Rome, which was set during the events of this comic. But yeah, that was my review of Batman Dark Victory by Jeph Loeb, and bye.